There is a reason so many people awaken spiritually and yet remain deeply confused about who they actually are. It isn't because the truth is too complex. It's because the language has been collapsed. Ancient traditions used precise maps of consciousness, but modern spirituality blurred them into something vague and comforting. Soul, spirit, higher self, and God were merged into one glowing idea, and in that merging, clarity was lost. When the map dissolves, even truth can mislead. The ancients understood something we have forgotten. Identity is layered. To mistake one layer for another was not considered a harmless misunderstanding, it was considered dangerous. In the Gnostic texts, this confusion was called forgetfulness, not ignorance. Forgetfulness meant speaking from the wrong center of being. It meant letting the surface voice claim authority that belonged to something deeper. And when that happens, even spiritual language can become a veil instead of a revelation. Today, people casually say, "I am my soul," because the soul feels intimate. It carries emotion, memory, longing, grief, and desire. Others say, "I am spirit," because spirit sounds elevated, clean, and eternal. Some go further and declare, "I am God," without understanding what part of them is speaking. These statements aren't wrong because they are false. They are wrong because they are incomplete, and incompleteness creates distortion. The early mystics never spoke this loosely. In texts like the Apocryphon of John and the Valentinian teachings, identity is described as a structure, not a slogan. They warned that when the soul believes it is the source, it becomes vulnerable. When the ego believes it is divine, it becomes inflated. And when the true source is forgotten, the entire inner order collapses. Confusion, suffering, and manipulation follow naturally. This is why so many people feel spiritually activated, yet psychologically unstable. They've touched something real, but they don't know where it belongs within them. They mistake a current for a source, a memory for an origin, a voice for the speaker. Without a clear hierarchy, inner experiences pile up without integration. Awakening begins, but orientation never arrives. Ancient traditions did not awaken people by overwhelming them with light. They awakened people by restoring order. They taught seekers to distinguish between what flows, what remembers, what chooses, and what simply is. They knew that liberation does not come from more experiences, but from knowing where an experience originates. Power is not gained by claiming higher identity. It is gained by locating it correctly. This is why the rulers and false authorities described in Gnostic texts did not need to destroy humanity. They only needed to confuse it. A being that does not know which layer it inhabits can be guided, harvested, redirected, and controlled. Forget the source, and the surface becomes loud. Forget the center, and the periphery begins to rule. This is not mythology. It is psychology written in cosmic language. This chapter is not here to give you another belief. It is here to restore the map. Before we speak of the soul, the spirit, the higher self, or the monad, the confusion must be named honestly. You are not one thing. You never were. And until you understand the difference between the layers of your own being, you will keep searching outward for what has always been ordered inward. Before you had a story, before you had a soul history, before you had a personality or even awareness of being aware, there was something that did not move, did not speak, and did not divide itself. The Gnostics called it the monad. Not a god in the human sense, not a ruler, not a creator with intention, but the absolute point from which all things arise without effort. The monad does not think, it does not decide, it simply is. The greatest mistake modern spirituality makes is personalizing the monad. The monad is not watching you. It is not judging you. It is not guiding you step by step. Those functions belong to other layers. The monad is prior to function. In the Apocryphon of John, it is described as invisible, ineffable, and unknowable, not because it is hidden, but because it has no opposite by which it can be perceived. The monad does not incarnate. This must be understood clearly. What incarnates can fragment. What fragments can suffer. What suffers can forget. The monad does none of these. It emanates. It overflows. Creation is not a choice it makes. It is a consequence of fullness. Like light radiating from a source, emanation happens because it cannot not happen. This is why ancient traditions warned against claiming unity prematurely. To say, "I am the monad," while still bound to fear, identity, and memory is not enlightenment. It is confusion speaking with borrowed language. The monad cannot be wounded. If you are wounded, you are not speaking from there. That does not diminish you, it clarifies you. The monad is the source node. It is not inside your body, yet nothing in your body exists without it. It is closer than thought and farther than imagination. You cannot access it through emotion, belief, or effort. You can only recognize it by removing what it is not. Silence, not vision, is its nearest companion. When mystics spoke of returning to the One, they did not mean traveling upward through experiences. They meant subtracting identity until only presence remained. The monad is not reached by ascent, it is revealed by undoing. This is why so many seekers chase light endlessly and still feel incomplete. They are adding where subtraction is required. The monad is not your higher self. It is not your soul. It is not your spirit. It is the ground from which all of them arise. Confusing it with these layers turns reverence into fantasy and depth into performance. The ancients knew better. They treated the monad with stillness, not claims. To understand the monad is not to understand it intellectually. It is to know where you are not. And once you know that, everything else begins to fall into its proper place. If the monad is stillness, spirit is movement. Not movement through space, but movement through being. Spirit is the first differentiation, the breath that flows outward from the source without leaving it. Ancient texts called it pneuma, breath, wind, current. It is not an identity, it is an animation. Spirit is not personal. This is where many teachings quietly mislead. Spirit does not have preferences. It does not form attachments. It does not carry trauma. Spirit flows through saints and tyrants alike. It empowers creation, not morality. To confuse spirit with goodness is to misunderstand its nature entirely. In the Gnostic cosmology, spirit is the carrier of divine vitality. It moves through eons, worlds, and beings, animating form without becoming trapped in it. It is the electricity that allows consciousness to operate, but electricity is not the machine. It is the current, not the structure. This is why people can feel spiritually energized and still be deeply confused. Spirit can be active while the soul remains fragmented. Energy is not wisdom. Power is not integration. Ancient initiates were trained to hold spirit without mistaking its force for identity. Spirit does not remember. It does not forget. It does not store experience. It passes through. When you feel moments of inspiration, clarity, or expansion, you are touching spirit. But that does not mean spirit is who you are. It means something is flowing through you. This is also why spiritual highs fade. Spirit moves. It was never meant to be clung to. Those who chase constant activation end up exhausted because they try to live as a current instead of letting the current pass through a stable center. The ancients did not worship spirit. They respected it. They built vessels capable of receiving it without being overwhelmed. Without structure, spirit burns. Without grounding, it destabilizes. This is why mysticism without discipline collapses into chaos. Spirit is sacred, but it is not sovereign. It answers to the source and serves the unfolding of form. To understand spirit is to let it move without letting it rule. The soul is where things become personal. It is the bridge between the invisible and the embodied, the translator between spirit and matter. In ancient traditions, the soul was never treated lightly because it was understood to be both luminous and vulnerable. Unlike the monad, the soul can be shaped. Unlike spirit, it can be wounded. The soul is the keeper of memory. Not just memory from this life, but memory across experience. This is why the soul carries longing that does not match your biography. It remembers before you remember. It holds imprints that logic cannot explain. In Gnostic texts, the soul descends. It moves through realms. It encounters powers, influences, and distortions. This descent is not a punishment. It is a function. The soul exists to interface, to experience, to translate the infinite into form. But in doing so, it becomes exposed. This is why trauma affects identity so deeply. Trauma does not touch the monad. It does not stain spirit. It fractures the soul. And when the soul fragments, the ego forms compensations to survive. Healing, then, is not about becoming more spiritual. It is about restoring coherence at the soul level. Modern spirituality often bypasses the soul, treating it as something to transcend. The ancients did the opposite. They protected it. They healed it. They knew that an unintegrated soul becomes a gateway for confusion, manipulation, and false authority. The soul is not eternal in the same way the monad is eternal. It persists, but it can be shaped, altered, even lost in certain traditions. This is why knowledge of the soul was guarded. To misunderstand it was to endanger it. When you speak of your deepest fears, your oldest griefs, your inexplicable homesickness, you are speaking from the soul. This is not weakness. It is honesty. The soul is the most human and the most sacred interface you possess. To know your soul is not to identify as it, but to tend it. The soul is the bridge, not the destination. The ego was never meant to be worshipped, but it was never meant to be destroyed either. It is the interface designed for density, the mask consciousness wears to survive gravity, time, and separation. The tragedy of modern spirituality is that it turned the ego into an enemy instead of a tool. War was declared where training was required. The ego forms early because it must. It learns patterns, mirrors behavior, and constructs identity out of repetition. It is efficient, adaptive, and protective. But it is not wise. It does not see the whole. It sees what kept you alive. Expecting it to reveal truth is like asking armor to explain the body beneath it. When spiritual teachings attack the ego without offering a deeper center, the psyche fractures. The ego collapses, but nothing takes its place. This is why so many seekers feel disoriented, dissociated, or hollow after ego death experiences. Structure was removed without relocation. The avatar was shattered, but the player never stepped forward. Ancient initiatory systems did not aim to erase the ego. They aimed to seat it. The ego was taught obedience, not submission, but alignment. When the ego understands its role, it becomes transparent. It stops defending illusions and starts serving clarity. It still functions, but it no longer rules. The ego belongs to the soul. It is shaped by soul memory, family lineage, trauma, and environment. This is why ego work without soul healing fails. You cannot command the avatar to relax while the interface beneath it remains fragmented. Healing restores trust. Trust quiets the ego. The ego becomes tyrannical only when it believes it is alone. When cut off from deeper layers, it compensates with control. Fear becomes strategy. Identity becomes armor. Pride becomes defense. These are not moral failures. They are symptoms of disconnection. You do not awaken by killing the ego. You awaken by outgrowing its authority. When identity relocates, the ego relaxes naturally. It no longer has to pretend to be eternal. The ego was never your prison. It was your vehicle. You simply forgot you were driving. The phrase higher self sounds absolute, but it is not. It implies finality where there is function. In ancient traditions, what we now call the higher self was understood as a mediating intelligence, not the source, but a remembering companion that exists across experience. In Gnostic cosmology, this appears as a luminous counterpart, sometimes called an image, sometimes a guide, sometimes a syzygy. It is closer to the soul than the monad, and that distinction matters. The higher self remembers more because it has traveled more, not because it stands outside creation. This is why guidance can still be imperfect. The higher self sees patterns, but it does not override free will. It offers orientation, not command. When people claim infallibility through their higher self, they mistake access for authority. The ancients tested guidance. They did not surrender discernment to it. The higher self communicates through intuition, resonance, and symbolic nudges, not orders. It speaks softly because it assumes sovereignty. It does not shout, threaten, or inflate. If an inner voice demands obedience or special status, it is not guidance. It is compensation. Modern spirituality often turns the higher self into a substitute god. This is dangerous. It externalizes responsibility inwardly, creating spiritual bypass cloaked as self-trust. True guidance strengthens clarity. False guidance feeds identity. The higher self exists to assist the soul in integration, not to replace the monad. It helps realign memory, purpose, and direction across lifetimes. It is not above consequence. It is still within experience. Respect the higher self, but do not enthrone it. It is a compass, not the North Star. When guidance deepens humility rather than ego, you know you are listening correctly. Hierarchy has been misunderstood because power has been abused. But hierarchy is not domination, it is placement. When the ancients spoke of order, they did not mean control, they meant coherence. Each layer of being has a role, and confusion begins when those roles collapse. The monad is source. Spirit is flow. Soul is interface. Ego is function. This is not philosophy, it is architecture. Ignore architecture and systems fail. Confuse levels and distortion becomes inevitable. Most spiritual suffering comes from misplacement. The ego tries to speak for the soul. The soul tries to speak as the source. Spirit is mistaken for identity. Each mistake produces a different kind of imbalance. Anxiety, inflation, dissociation, obsession, all are symptoms of hierarchy collapse. Restoring order does not diminish you, it stabilizes you. When identity returns to its proper depth, energy redistributes naturally. You stop forcing insight. You stop chasing experience. You stop demanding certainty from layers that were never meant to provide it. Ancient initiation was about reseating consciousness. The initiate learned to recognize which voice was speaking. Fear sounded different than intuition. Desire felt different than guidance. Silence carried more authority than thought. This is why clarity feels calm. Confusion feels loud. Truth does not need to convince. It simply settles. Once hierarchy is restored internally, external authority loses its grip. You cannot be easily manipulated when you know where you stand. Order is freedom. In every ancient system that understood consciousness, the same principle appears. You do not attack what cannot be reached. The monad is unreachable. Spirit is too diffuse to imprison. The soul, however, is precise, personal, and permeable. It remembers, and because it remembers, it can forget. That makes it the perfect point of interference. The Gnostics did not describe archons as monsters lurking in the sky. They described them as mechanisms, forces that exploit ignorance, fragmentation, and misidentification. The soul was never assaulted directly. It was distracted, fragmented, and overloaded. When memory becomes incoherent, identity collapses into survival. This is why the most effective control is never physical. It is psychological and emotional. Trauma fractures continuity. Shame disrupts self-trust. Fear locks attention into the present moment with no depth. A soul that cannot descend inward cannot remember upward. It becomes trapped at the surface of experience. Once the soul fragments, the ego must compensate. It builds identities, beliefs, and narratives to hold the psyche together. These compensations feel like personality, but they are emergency structures. Over time, they harden. What began as protection becomes prison. The soul remains buried beneath layers of adaptation. In ancient initiation rites, this stage was called captivity, not because the soul was stolen, but because it forgot how to move. Memory loss was the true fall, not sin, not rebellion, forgetfulness. This is why gnosis was always framed as remembrance, never forgiveness. False light thrives here. Any teaching that promises escape without integration appeals to a fragmented soul. Any system that flatters the ego while bypassing healing keeps the interface distorted. This is why discernment was considered sacred. Not every light leads home. Restoring the soul is not dramatic. It is slow, honest, and often uncomfortable. Memory returns in waves, grief surfaces, longing sharpens. But as coherence rebuilds, something else happens. Authority returns inward. The soul remembers how to orient itself. A coherent soul cannot be ruled by confusion. This is why clarity has always been dangerous, not because it fights systems, but because it no longer needs them. Most people imagine awakening as rising above life, but the ancient texts describe something far subtler and far more difficult. Awakening is not escape. It is descent into clarity. It is the movement of identity from the surface layer of reaction into the deeper ground of awareness. Ascension fantasies promise relief without responsibility. They suggest that suffering disappears once you reach a certain state. Gnosis never promised this. It promised orientation. When you know where you stand, suffering no longer defines you, but it still passes through. Relocation is internal. The body remains. The ego remains. The world remains. What changes is who is speaking. Fear no longer claims authority. Emotion no longer dictates meaning. Thought no longer pretends to be truth. Each layer returns to its function. This is why awakening often feels anticlimactic at first. There is less noise, less urgency, less need to prove or explain. Fireworks belong to spirit. Stability belongs to truth. Those who chase constant intensity remain dependent on stimulation. Ancient initiates were described as twice born, not because they left the world, but because they were no longer owned by it. They moved through the same structures, but from a different center. Their actions came from alignment, not reaction. Relocation also ends spiritual comparison. When identity settles correctly, envy dissolves. Hierarchies of enlightenment collapse. There is no race upward. There is only depth inward. This is the awakening no one markets because it cannot be commodified. It does not inflate identity. It dissolves false urgency. It quietly frees. To awaken is not to become more than human. It is to finally inhabit being human from the correct center. If something in this map felt familiar, it is because recognition always comes before explanation. Truth does not arrive as new information. It arrives as remembrance. Long before language formed around these ideas, something in you already knew where it belonged. You are not learning who you are. You are remembering where you have been speaking from. This is why clarity feels quiet. There is no rush when identity settles into its proper depth. The need to prove, explain, or convince dissolves. You stop trying to become something else and begin inhabiting what was always there. The noise fades, not because life becomes perfect, but because you are no longer mistaking surface experience for source. The ancient texts never promised escape from the world. They promised orientation within it. They taught that liberation does not come from leaving the body, abandoning the ego, or chasing light endlessly. It comes from restoring order inside the self. When each layer returns to its rightful place, suffering loses its authority to define you. This is why remembrance is so threatening to systems built on confusion. A being who knows where their awareness truly rests cannot be easily manipulated by fear, urgency, or false hierarchy. They do not need constant instruction. They do not seek permission to trust their own clarity. They move through the world without being owned by it. But remembrance does not happen once. It unfolds. It deepens. It reveals itself in layers, just as identity does. And this is why story has always been the vessel for this kind of knowledge. Before doctrines, before institutions, before belief systems hardened into control, truth traveled through myth, parable, and lived experience. Story speaks to the soul without forcing the mind. That is why these teachings continue beyond this channel through my Gnostic-inspired novels and audiobooks. Not as explanations, but as journeys. Not as answers, but as mirrors. They explore these same truths through characters, worlds, and mythic remembrance. allowing you to encounter them rather than simply hear about them. If something in this work resonated, the invitation is simple and honest. Go deeper, not outward. Read, listen, sit with the ideas slowly. Let the story work on you the way ancient teachings were always meant to, indirectly, gently, but irreversibly. Supporting this work helps keep this channel uncompromised, independent, and devoted to depth rather than noise. And if you do nothing else, remember this. You were never meant to become enlightened as an achievement. You were never meant to escape your humanity. You were meant to remember where you stand. The source was never lost. The path was never upward. It has always been inward. And now you know how to recognize the difference.